welcome everyone. And here we are again, doing our thing, meditating together and use these tools that the universe has revealed to us or we've discovered. That's one of the questions. You get down to the philosophical questions. And did we discover mathematics? In other words, these numerical patterns built into the universe, or did we just make it up our heads and project it? So I've heard a number of scientists come down on the opposite sides of that one. So that's something to hold. You really want to be confused. But yeah, lately I've been getting back into quantum physics, which I do every few years. It's like I rediscover the Beatles every few years, and hopefully each time I get a little bit deeper. And it's really mind-blowing. And, they started discovering this with Niels Bohr and Einstein and Heisenberg and all these guys at the early part of the 20th century. And it was hard for them to handle what they were finding. However, if they hadn't come up with it, we wouldn't be talking on this worldwide thing called the internet that we don't even know. I mean, have you ever thought what the shape of the internet is? Like, no, it's just there. Then I put stuff up in a cloud, and I've never even seen the cloud either. But that's meant to be somewhat humorous. But yeah, so the hard problems of the mystery of being is what they've been working on all of these many years. And it started off calling it the unified field theory. And Einstein energy equals mc squared basically says that energy, matter, is the same, or is energy is the same as matter if you just like go the speed of light and square it. However one does that, but when it comes down to it, energy is matter, and matter is energy, and it's all God, if you will. It's all just God. Wow. And they discovered that, and it works super well on a really small, the smallest kind of reality that we can look down into. And we go from planetary systems, galaxies, into animals or human beings, and different organs that differentiate. And when we're inside our mother's womb, and the cells, and it goes to molecules, atoms, and it just goes smaller and smaller until finally photons, and all this little stuff. And the smallest thing they've ever found any kind of evidence for are called quarks, which is a pretty good name when you think about it. They found these things. What shall we call them? Let's call them quark. And I think that's a name for kind of a cottage cheese dish in South America too. So I don't know if it had anything to do with cottage cheese. But after that, we're trying to put it all together, and they can't. They can't take the big picture things like that of gravity and time and everything that Einstein got intuitively and wrote up the formula, and that changed everything. And then you have down at the smallest level, well, those two worlds, the macro and the micro world, don't fit together. And they should fit together in the mind of everybody, because the scientists anyway, because, well, they should. So they worked on this thing called the unified field theory, and they couldn't get it together. And then about 35 years ago, this thing called string theory came into vogue. And there was a popular sitcom, I think, called String Theory. That's where most Americans know about string theory, through the name of the sitcom, which I never saw, by the way. But anyway, and they did that for about 35 years. And then all the things that the theory, and it's just really long, complex, numbers and equations and all this stuff. And this explains it. So you get down inside a quark, which nobody's ever been able to do. And there's these little vibrational strings. And that explains everything. Everything is just a vibration, little strings. And well, everything that, or most things, as this theory predicted they would find once they were testing it, didn't happen. So the best minds in physics spent about 30 years working on a theory that didn't work out. And it's really inspiring to see these very, very smart physicists talking about it. And they get these perplexed looks on their face. And, you're a professor at Princeton or something of physics, and you spent your whole career working on this theory that it doesn't seem to work. So it's very painful. And I think Ken Wilber said that scientific revolutions happen one funeral at a time. I mean, people that have made their careers on this certain thing that didn't work out, and like, and now what? And then you put the James Webb telescope, and they're starting to see all these things that aren't supposed to be there, that all our science and physics and mathematics did not predict and shouldn't be there if what we thought were so. So the mystery deepens and deepens and deepens. But to get it down to what we can work on today is, back in the 90s, they started calling it the hard problem of consciousness. The hard problem of consciousness. Well, what is the hard problem of consciousness? Hard problem of consciousness is describe what consciousness is. We all got some, but we don't know what to describe it, basically. And if you don't think we can't even describe consciousness, the most real thing that's happening for all of us. All these little particles came together and created this nervous system and human brain that creates this massive inner universe that each one of us creates in our brains. And sometimes they do link up. Okay. And we have mirror neurons on our heads, they've discovered, but in altered states of consciousness at concerts, when everybody's into the thing, there seems the consciousness spreads, or psychedelics. I mean, this stuff happens, but it's not our normal walking around thing. So know this, that consciousness is not the content of consciousness. Okay. So you have this space here. I'll look at my computer screen, and just like space, but it's like, what's in that space? Well, there's oxygen, and there's all these particles and all this stuff, and then somewhere the internet's going, going all around the world as we speak, which is fantastic. So we have this whole other world that can only be revealed through instrumentation. But what is consciousness? They don't know, and they can't find a mathematical formula to describe what consciousness is. So they just said, well, maybe consciousness is just an illusion. That's what your reductionist scientists will say. It's just an illusion created by all these little squiggly things that came together in the form of human beings. And now we think we're conscious, but we're really not. It's just cellular things bopping around and synapses snapping and all this stuff, which is a really unsatisfactory description of this obvious reality. And so if you can't, we can't even come up with a scientific way of describing what consciousness is. Well, what do? Well, let's just ignore it and try to look for the unified field theory or whatever theory we're working on now. And the very thing that allows us to think about these things, we'll just not bring it into the equation. And of course, and I think it's pretty common knowledge now that at these back in the early part of the 20th century, they found out that the observer was influencing how these minute particles would behave. So if you're just sitting there, you don't look at it, it does one thing, but as soon as you look at it, it does another thing. So consciousness itself, whatever it is, which we can't describe, is affecting things at these micro levels. So what does that tell you about the universe? So I don't expect you to figure out what consciousness. Maybe I do. If anybody has, in this meditation, if somehow it just becomes very clear, and I think it is kind of the spacious awareness that everything arises in from the Big Bang. If that's even so now, they're starting to doubt that too. Anyway, the mystery gets bigger and bigger. But see if you can do that. And once we can figure out what consciousness is, maybe we can. And this is, I know, it's a big one. You can figure out what God is. That's even harder, you know. So yeah, these are the problems with these things. And I often say that I may be the dumbest person who's ever looked at quantum physics in a serious way. So, but that doesn't stop me, you know. The monkey keeps sticking his hand back in that jar, and then can't get the jar off because, you know, I grab onto these things. So if that made any sense at all, we're going to do from the album Kismet, and this is 40 minutes basically, and it's a very powerful track. But this time, just try to disidentify with the content, you know, your thoughts. Pam, I know you've got a very active brain. You're thinking about all kinds of things you got to do today, but just let go of that and let these things arise and go, hello, little stuff, this, that, and that person really bugged me or whatever that. Anyways, let that stuff go, let it be there, and it will, you know, eventually go away. And just see if you can stay with that open awareness, and maybe we can get a little further in the mystery, you know, and probably poets have come closer to it than scientists have up to this point. So the hard problem of consciousness. Let's soften up and look into that in this meditation, and take us away from the temporal, all the stuff that's going on right now, and go into the timeless, go into the Grund, the ground, as Meister Eckhart said, the ground of being, the God that is beyond God, pure, just the pure beingness of being. Okay, that is, it's the great fullness or the great emptiness, depending how you look at it. Anyway, so without further ramblings, why don't we get going? was a beautiful track. And done that in a while. Very powerful. Mm. Well, one of the people I've been studying lately and that I've known about by reputation for years is Meister Eckhart. And he lived in the latter part of the 1200s when he did most of his things. And he was the head of the University of Paris, which was like the school in Christianity at that point, right before or right after Thomas Aquinas. And anyway, so the sobriquet, or the title that Meister Eckhart got, the man from whom God hid nothing. And I might have said that wrong, but that's quite a thing. And incredible, you read this guy and he's obviously a Buddhist, he's a Sufi, he's a Christian, he's a Lakota medicine man. I mean, he's got all of these things. And of course, he'd never heard of any of these people, at his time. He maybe heard of something about the Sufis, but definitely never heard of a Buddhist, never ran into that. And the way he describes it is it's truly amazing. And he left a lot of stuff. He wrote a lot of stuff in Latin, which was like the official language of learning in the West. But he also did a lot of sermons in Middle German, I guess. It's a medieval type of German. And apparently when he would talk, there'd be these nuns or whatever, just writing it all down because they were pretty sure that he was transmitting something very, very important. And that was a very kind of confusing time in the history of Christianity, or at least the Western Church. I think they had 2 or 3 popes running around at the time, and there was a lot of competition. And Meister Eckhart was a Dominican, and the other, I'm getting seasick, Heidi, watching you. And the other big influence were the Franciscans. And this was after they never met, Meister Eckhart and Francis. And I was a big fan of Francis ever since I was about 14 or 15 when I discovered a biography of him. And he made complete sense of all the things that I was experiencing spiritually in my young, Parsifal teenage mind. It's like Francis brought it all together. But his heart was quite broken even before he died, because his brothers, which lived in a little, grass made of just little huts out near Assisi, and they lived in poverty, and they had great joy and great simplicity, and it was all about love. And he had turned over the leadership of the order before he passed, and they were already starting to collect properties and monasteries and power. And Franciscans weren't monks. They weren't to live a monkish life where you went off and prayed and worked on yourself and prayed for the world and tried to find God. In a monastery, they were friars. They were out in the world serving people. And tremendous character who has been recognized as a saint by just about everybody, by the Sikhs, by the Muslims, by the Hindus. I mean, his spiritual power was that good. And he I think he went on the Second Crusade, and he was so depressed about what had happened to his order, how it had become just another cumulative power political structure that was well on the way. And he had some very talented people that took over for him. So the Franciscans grew. And of course, his teachings were so appealing that a lot of people, and he had ways for you to be a friar, but he always had a way to, part of the Franciscan order, you could be married, a householder, and still be a Franciscan. And there are certain rules to live by. But anyway, by the time Francis had passed on, well, Dominic was there, and they were contemporaries, Saint Dominic, and the Dominicans were a teaching order. And the story goes when Francis and Dominic met, Dominic was so impressed by Francis that he wanted to combine their orders. And Francis went, no, I don't think so. That doesn't feel right. But he gave him his belt, his little rope that he had around his waist. He gave it to Dominic, and that's why the Dominicans wear one of these little ropes. It's because of the great love that Dominic and Francis felt for each other when they met way back there in the land of cotton where those guys were. But anyway, by the time that and the Franciscans, kind of their yoga was love, okay, and the Dominicans, it was more about waking up and realizing God, and those things they're pretty close, but that was just kind of the emphasis. And so Dominicans had great respect for learning and scholasticism and all of this, studying the scriptures, study Aristotle, all the things they had. And Francis was just, no, let's just love. That's enough. Just go out and minister to the poor, be with the leopards. And anyway, that was Francis. But in the end of Meister Eckhart's life, the political structure of the Franciscans, and it must have been 50, 60 years after Francis had died, were saying that Eckhart was a heretic and they were trying him for heresy, which is a pretty serious thing back in them days. They didn't do like my friend Matthew Fox and just like silence you. They really silence you. Well, they didn't. There was some scripture about you shouldn't spill blood, so they burn people at the stake. That's getting pretty legalistic. Please. Can you imagine Francis burning somebody at the stake? But so they were going after Dominic, and he really defended himself. And there's all there, they were taking notes and everything. And he was saying, no, you're taking what I'm saying literally, and that's not what I'm saying. You got to take it in the context of what I'm saying. It's like to find God, you have to lose God. He would say colon, things like that. What does that mean? Well, it means that your conception of God, all these things, the guy that looks like me, but with a bigger beard and probably more muscles sitting on a throne someplace, is, the conception of God. And he says, you got to, that has to be all let go of to find what it really is. And amazing. I really recommend it. And because he was tried for heresy, and they did some kind of legal thing. They said, well, he's not a heretic, but some of his teachings are heretical. Sophisticated. You need a lawyer mind to figure this stuff out. But anyway, before they were able to do anything really nasty to him, he died, which is a blessing, But because of that, he kind of had a stain on his reputation, which was huge at the time, because he was teaching at the University of Paris. That was like the place. Went back there twice and taught. He was also an administrator, and he was in the world also. But because of that, he was, you don't see Meister Eckhart churches and stuff like that. He was never made a saint or saint Eckhart. He had this stain on his reputation, and unfortunately, that put a stain on his teachings, which are amazing. And I think the history of the church would have been much more enlightened if he were recognized as a great teacher. So, yeah, the man from whom God hid nothing. So, there's plenty of books. There's one that I have that has his sermons in Middle German, which was the first time they were really kind of writing this stuff down. Before that, everything had been done among the educated in Latin. So anyway, and then they have his Latin writings and all, but with the English translations right there, and I can probably understand about 60% of the German from his sermons, and it helps to have the English there. But amazing stuff, and yeah, a great light. So if you guys want to learn a little more about him, instead of watching cat videos, there's nothing wrong with cat videos. Sorry, Heidi. You can look on about Meister Eckhart on YouTube. There's a lot of professors and that are talking about him with great insight. And Heidi, what was the name of our friend that we had on the podcast?
James Finley?
Yeah, James Finley. If he has become a friend, and he has a amazing story. I mean, the stuff that guy went through, and he just radiates godness. Look up James Finley on YouTube, and he also has a podcast doing something with the mystics, and he goes through and takes apart and examines the different Christian mystics. Up to this point, he may get into non-Christian mystics too. He was anyway, a tremendous guy, and he talks really well about Meister Eckhart, and it's amazing. I didn't get into these guys until very recently, because I kind of had this thing, my rebellion thing against the Catholic Church and all this stuff. But my God, some of these people, and then right around that time, there were orders of women along the Rhineland who were incredible mystics and really good, Christians in the best sense of the word. And Meister Eckhart and Julian of Norwich was right around the same time. Again, an incredible teacher whose teachings were hid for like 500 years because what she was saying was so radical. Yeah, with same with Eckhart, that they just started surfacing. The first modern translation was in the late 1800s, and then it started from there. And now she's recognized as a great saint, but not officially by the church. She's kind of like on like that Meister Eckhart thing. If she'd been recognized and her teachings had been accepted, it would have been a whole different story with what happened, and what is happening in the church now. So pay attention to your lights. And it's also, probably most of the people that are listening to this or meditating has come from a Western tradition. And often we get very disappointed with churches and the stuff that happened to us with kids. And I grew up Catholic, and I was never abused, never hurt, or nobody's really mean to me. It was just kind of didn't relate to it. I mean, nothing sparked, and then I had my own spiritual experiences, awakenings, and alone by myself, with my New Testament, that I had to try to sort of figure it out. But yeah, it's a worthwhile thing to go back into your tradition. If you were born in a Buddhist culture, to go back and study your roots. And I rejected this kind of thinking for years, but there's great, whether Islamic mystics too are amazing, Hafiz and Rumi and others, and the Jewish mystics. Oh my God, these guys were absolutely incredibly brilliant. And if you had a big convention, all the great mystics from all the great traditions together, they would completely get each other. Even if they didn't speak the same languages, I think they would just know that they had tapped into this kind of universal mystery that is at the ground, the Grund, as Meister Eckhart says, of all things, and it all proceeds from there. And our dear friend H.A. Almas Hamid, he wrote a book recently, which is pretty radical, but he says that every there's not just one way to wake up. You have to recognize emptiness, or you have to find God, or you have to ask Jesus in your heart, or whatever, how the languages explain. God is infinite, and there are infinite number of ways to experience God that are valid and powerful. So, and instead of getting, well, I'm a Buddhist, these Christians just don't get it, and a Christian, well, these Buddhists, they just, they don't get Jesus in that. So they're just, God knows what they're doing. And all of this stuff, it's like God comes, it's just infinitely profound, and it's all the experience of God, and we just have to consciously recognize that. So yeah, I used to say that I prefer my spiritual teachers dead, right? I've had experiences with so-called spiritual teachers that weren't so great, but there were a lot of really, and there still are teachers that are coming through and transmitting today. But go back and study these people, and we have a limited amount of brain time during the day, and we have so much instant garbage that's available through the internet. But on the other hand, we have instant treasure. Okay, it's amazing. There's never been anything like YouTube ever in the history of our species, where you can go and just see almost anybody talking about anything at whatever level that you're on. If you want to learn how to play guitar, so I did largely enhance my guitar playing through YouTube. Masters teaching you right there, or the greatest minds and the greatest professors from the greatest universities talking about whatever you want to learn. It's all there, and sometimes in our education system, we're chasing a piece of paper or a title, and I understand that, because that opens doors and all that. But when you get down to it, it's really about the transmission of learning. And yeah, and words can be amazing things. Okay. Sometimes we disparage, oh, well, God can't be explained, and blah, 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 blah. But words can have a almost magical transitory, is that a word used correctly, property, where they can transmit. You can connect with Rumi's heart and mind. You can connect with Meister Eckhart. You can connect with Jesus. Blessed are they who hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. It opens up, it awakens us, and the light can come through there. So yeah, pay attention to what you say, because our words are powerful. And yeah, use the masters that are there, these men and women who have been transmitting this direct experience of the divine for thousands of years, and ever since they've been writing it down. Okay, and I think it was probably in the Hindu tradition, were the first ones that were writing this stuff down, or at least the writing survived. And you can go back there and read the Bhagavad Gita and see what they're talking about. It's amazing stuff. So anyway, it's we started out talking about consciousness and our inability to even describe that very well, at least scientifically. I was listening to a sadhu guru the other day and he was doing a pretty good job. He was very clear about it. But and what is the difference between consciousness and God? That's your homework. Figure that one out. So yeah, I guess that's way more than enough. So thank you for being here. I had a little technical problem. For those who were cheating, seeing your eyes open the first 10 minutes, I was trying to find a way to listen to this stuff, but I did find it, and very beautiful tracks. That's Kismet. And I think Intuition was the name of the one we were listening to. So if you don't have that as part of your, your collection, do that. And don't forget to check out, if you haven't already, the Deep Transformation podcast with myself and Roger Walsh and our amazing guest. Very good stuff. And in the beginning was the logos, right? And the logos really starts to flow in these things. It's quite an extraordinary experience. So, and it's something that we can share. So check it out for the infusion of inspiration, of new ideas and thoughts, and dusting off some of your old stuff. Anyway, helping us wake up, both to wake up and to wake up to the fact that, as it's said in the book, God is love. And here's Meister Eckhart, and I'll shut up after this, is love doesn't need a why. W-H-Y. Love doesn't need a why. Thank you, Meister. Okay, God bless you guys.